These are some of the master tapes. But that's not all, because I have these things that I recorded back during the 80s and early 90s using various 4-track cassette units when I lived over there. And I was thinking last week about, actually I was talking to my friend Sonny about a tape I did many years ago that was called PushMePullYou music. And us talking about that, gee, I think I'm going to find it. I might. It was when, as a young man in my 20s, I began wanting to examine what would happen. Oh, look at that. Artie Big Lips sampler. Look at that. All kinds of cool Mark McGee related stuff. Yeah. Those recordings that he did up in Massachusetts when he moved there after college, and Porcelain Forehead in Syracuse. Look at that, 1987. Oh my God. Oh, come on, I know I'm in the vicinity. There it is. I think. Nope, that's not it. There's that music I recorded when Bob Parkinson got married for him. The Blunt. Oh my God. Syracuse, 1980-81. Oh my God. There's some early stuff at Toad Hall and with Bob Jordan. 1980 on WTSC radio with John Porcello and Tim Costello. God, I wonder if these tapes would even play anymore. There's some stuff with Dick Metcalf from back when I was in Korea. I still haven't found PushMePullYou music yet. It ought to be in here somewhere. Let's see. Let's keep going. Oh, Hand Kitchen. That's super early. Room with a View. Two Big Brains. Autobiogram. Oh my God, that's all from the same era, but I can't find the one I'm looking for. Most Hasty Musics. Rude Musics. Pertaining to Digestion. Corpus Electric. Oh my God, there it is. Come on now. Oh, beautiful. February 1984. And on the other side of this 90-minute are the mix downs of another one called Sounds So Wrong. Oh my God. I was in Monterey, California. And was using a Fostex X15. I'm going to put this in the top drawer now. I was using a Fostex X15 4-track recorder. Hell, they'd only been out for a year or two. And what happened was I chanced upon a guitar that I didn't need very cheaply. It belonged to an army captain who was also learning Korean up there above the Presidio with me. Good guy. He didn't play anymore, and he had an old Epiphone hollow body, kind of like a Gibson 335. I think it was a Sheridan, maybe. But anyways, it was the type of Epiphone electric that one of the Beatles played, or one or two of the Beatles played. And he gave it to me for $200 in the case he bought it in, hard shell case. Still had the receipt in it, and a pitch pipe. And I took it down the hill to the music store there in Monterey, and they offered me enough money for that I could buy one of two things that I really wanted at the time. Either a 4-track, which was really new technology to me, but a friend in the Marine Corps had loaned me his, and I fell in love with it, and I felt like, wow, man, I've got a knack for this junk. I can really do some cool things with this. But I also thought I could do some very cool things with one of those early, and they're so rare right now. I kind of wish I had one. The old Electro Harmonics 16-second delay. Really well made, like EH products, and they called it, I think somebody that reviewed it in like maybe Guitar Player magazine or something said it was like Robert Fripp in a box, ostensibly referring to the kind of stuff he was doing with Brian Eno on those early sort of ambient tape loopy collaboration things they were doing. But I opted for the 4-track, and it was great. It was a wonderful toy to have when I was far away from everybody I cared about. Kept me busy, and anybody that's ever worked with old tape recording technology knows that if idle hands are the devil's workplace, your hands never get idle when you're making music and recording on a 4-track. And I always bought good high bias tapes, chrome tapes, from the better manufacturers at the time, like Maxell and BASF and stuff. But I went through a little stretch there where I read up on a fellow named Kurt Schwitters, and I was already really pretty familiar with a lot of the Dada movement in the arts. And in college we had done that kind of exquisite corpse, pass the picture around to different people and let people add to it as they would with image or text. We played with that stuff, and it was very fun. Tim Costello was a year or two older than me, and he was an art student, and I think he concentrated on ceramics mostly. But he could play the heck out of an acoustic guitar, and he lived in a big house that some other artsy and literature-y people lived in. I remember Mike Utter lived up on the top floor in sort of a long attic apartment. His room was at one end, and my other friend Mike Watkins lived at the other end. And then downstairs there were all kinds of interesting people. I lived on the second floor with Jack Rusinoff, Bruce Neckerbacher, and Holly Reich for about a year. I think it was my sophomore or junior year. It was quite an art house. But anyways, I wanted, and at that point, in the late 70s, they'd already talked about, demonic messages on records if you play them backwards and stuff like that. And my friend and I, Sonny, last week were talking about this little guitar break in a song from, I don't know, probably around 1970 or so, by a band called Marmalade. They only had one song that anyone ever heard, and it was called Reflections of My Life. And it's a really beautiful song. It certainly communicates a lot of study of the kind of things George Martin was building around these Beatles sketches, you know, those lovely arrangements and stuff. But there's a little bit of the guitar break in that song, if you listen carefully, that's backwards, you know? Like maybe 3 inches of tape in the guitar solo was flipped. You can hear it. You can hear the silence and then the reverse taper of the reverb going up to the full volume of the note. And I've always been interested in that kind of stuff. And so anyways, that cassette that I just had out, Push Me, Pull You music, I had a lot of poetry, and I guess you could call them lyrics, that I'd never used. And so I recorded myself speaking them. Then I took the cassette tape and turned it over so that it would play in reverse in the same machine. And then I would write down phonetically on another piece of paper what it sounded like backwards. Right? And then I would put a new clean tape into the machine, and I would recite this phonetic transposition that I had written down. I'd record myself doing that, and then flip the tape over. And invariably, it sounded quite like a robot voice, trying very hard to speak English and being just barely comprehensible, which I thought would be an interesting thing to put in a project that I might release, where I would write out the original texts, but all you would be hearing would be this robot text. And I don't know, this forward and backward tape thing is why I called it Push Me, Pull You music, thinking about that two-headed creature, you know, in the Dr. Dolittle stories. Tension, right? Well, anyways, so recently I learned about something that happened a long time ago that just is one of the bajillion things that I'll never find out about that are interesting, called the disintegration loops, where a man had these tape loops that he used for musical purposes, you know, Philip Glass, Steve Reich, Terry Riley, people like that, you know, they were very influential on him and on me too. And he kept his loops. But what he learned was that over time, the ferric compound that is attached to the tape degrades. And that when he revisited what they sounded like and put the loops back on his machine and listened to them and recorded that, he was recording the disintegration of the tape while it happened. You could literally see this dust falling off the tape player while it was playing it, meaning it wouldn't ever sound the same way again from loss of mass, and that this was something that you could hear. And eventually there were actually patches of bald tape that just, it was silence. And then maybe a little piano chord or a fragment of one would appear for a moment and then be rapidly truncated because all the ferric material had fallen off. And I have an acquaintance who I sent many cassette tapes to because he's an archivist and he has the means to keep this stuff from vanishing. A man named Frank. M. And these are the tapes that I didn't send him. You know, my original source tape stuff. I sent him a whole bunch of independent music from the 80s and 90s that people had sent me for review that I had hung on to, because that stuff is valuable to him. And but I didn't send him my stuff. I probably should have. I fear what would happen if I put it in a cassette deck and tried to play any of these things. It's pretty likely the tape would just stick together or something from various changes in humidity and whatnot, you know, over the years. But for friends of mine that have an interest in ambient music, or even make it, or make hard ambient music, which is ambient music that really isn't that relaxing. It's a little more not ignorable, you know, in the way that a sudden car crash on a calm afternoon 2 blocks away from you really gets your attention for a moment and sets your mind to wondering. That's what my idea of what hard ambient music is it doesn't permit itself to be boring or repetitious for very long without, you know, a meteor coming down suddenly or a piece of space junk into your pastoral listening experience. So I'd urge you folks to check out the Disintegration loops. I'll put a link to a good documentary down below. I'm not suggesting that you listen to all of the Disintegration loop, because that would take you about a day to do, okay? It's one of those long works like Andy Warhol used to do. Day-long movies, right? But the documentary, I think, for people that are involved in music and the arts, will be very fascinating to you, right? Because it's really talking about that sort of those kind of weird liminal spaces where like time and the future and the past kind of fall apart and are kind of treading along a very skinny sort of sense of wonder, you know, kind of like life and death issues make you think about. And I've put some pictures in of the studio here. Well, it's not really a studio. It's a place where all of my musical instruments are. But I felt like it was time to move some things around, and I wanted this heavy marble top here to be in front of the window so that my cat could get up on it and look out the window. He likes to do that. And I wanted to organize some of my amplifiers and drums and stuff so that they weren't so away from the wall and in the traffic zone, as it were. I've got about 6 or 7 different nice chairs in here where friends could come and jam. Anybody ever calls me up and says, "You feel like jamming?" I've got the place. And we usually feed people when they come over here to play too. That's just been our habit for a really long time, is to make sure people never leave hungry. The disintegration loop. So I guess all of us are kind of these disintegration loops made of meat that kind of shed their essence as we age. And perhaps Alzheimer's is sort of equivalent to those places on Basinski's tape where all of the ferric material fell off and there's just clear tape and silence. These kind of fugue zones that I remember my mom getting into there at the end. And that I kind of think my dad's getting into now too. And I have friends that are my age that are starting to show some concerning loss of ferric material. But anyways, I love you guys. Have a lovely day. Today is Sunday. It's not my Sabbath. So that means I can do whatever I feel like doing today, and this is what I'm doing. I'm probably going to do some raking today too. And we'll try to get my dog out back so that I can work out front on some editing.